So today I wanted to make a short video about the reasons as to why I decided to move away from Finland, even though it was just named the happiest country in the world again for the 8th time in a row. This is also gonna hurt my feelings a little bit because I feel that by naming all these reasons and explaining it, it almost feels like I'm betraying a friend somehow, that I'm talking behind my friend's back, but we're gonna get over it, or I'm gonna get over it. Okay, so don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Finland. I would go as far as to say that Finland is one of the big loves of my life. And I'll give you a little bit of a background here before I dive into the reasons. My love with Finland has started ever since I was 12 years old. So not gonna lie about my age, so that's over 20 years ago. And we can make a whole different video about why it was that I was so interested in Finland as a 12-year-old. We're just gonna leave it at that. But I love almost everything about Finland. I love the Finnish nature, I love the Finnish culture, I love the Finnish language, I love Finnish people, Finnish food to some extent. I find it's a super interesting country, and I was lucky enough to be able to live there for 7.5 years in total. So I moved there when I was 19, almost 20, because I wanted to spend a year in Finland, see what it's like to live in Helsinki and what it's like to learn the language. And so I went there to work as an au pair, and I did that for a little bit more than a year. And then after that, as it goes so often, I decided to stay and start my studies there. So then I went on to completing my first degree there, started to work there, and so very easily 7.5 years went by. It's kind of interesting because it's the place where I transitioned from being an idiotic teenager to somewhat of an adult, and that transition was of course shaped by Finnish culture and Finnish values and Finnish everyday life, so I feel that it still has an impact on me on a daily basis, and I'm sure that a lot of my thought processes and decision-making processes are still influenced by that. So I can say that some of my absolute best memories were made in Finland, and also some of my very worst, but I mean, this is who I am, and it's due to Finland. So why did I decide to leave then? The reasons behind me leaving, or the reasons behind me moving away and back to Germany, are quite multi-layered, to be honest. I had made the decision of going back to university in order to become a dentist, which is a whole subject on its own, and I covered that in another video. But even before I made the decision to go back to university, I had already reached a point where I was where I was starting to get a little bit fed up about living in Helsinki. And I'm gonna share these reasons with you now. Some of the reasons were, for example, that it's very expensive. And of course you could say that you earn a higher income in Finland, and in a way I felt quite lucky because at the age of 26, 27, I was one of the first in my friend group who, in comparison to my German friends, who had a relatively good income. But due to Finland being so expensive, I feel like it didn't really add on to the quality of life. And by that I mean that, of course, housing and renting was expensive, especially in comparison to actually Berlin back in the days. Like, I remember in 2015, Berlin was still, in comparison to Helsinki, super affordable. I know this has massively changed throughout the past years, and probably they're at an almost equal level by now. But yeah, back in the days, it felt insane to be spending so much rent on an apartment. Then the next thing was groceries. Groceries were super expensive, and I feel that Finns are also gonna be in accordance with that, but I felt that the quality of, for example, fresh fruit and vegetables wasn't that great, which is also, of course, due to the location and logistics in general, but it just all in all felt very expensive. And the same was for spare time activities, eating out, going out, so all of the things that in my 20s felt super important. So in comparison to eating out in Germany, Helsinki would always be 3 times more expensive. And the restaurant scene was so that even though there were quite many, and especially towards the end, right before I moved, there were quite many interesting restaurants, but it always felt like you're paying quite a bit for the type of quality that maybe wasn't that great in the end. And so even though you ended up paying quite a lot for the life there, I felt that the value that you you got back in return wasn't adding up or wasn't matching up, and that in a way started to bother me increasingly. Though keep in mind that I was in my 20s when I left Finland, so maybe by now it has changed. I mean, now living in Germany, I'm not saying every cucumber tastes absolutely fantastic and great that I buy from the supermarket, but those were my general observations when I was still living there. Another thing that started to bother me was that Helsinki was the only bigger city that you could live in Finland. I mean, duh, of course, because even though Finland is a very big country geographically, there's only 6 million people who live there, right? So of course, in a way, it makes sense that the capital is a big city. You have other big cities, of course, like Turku, Tampere, Oulu. And of course, you can't compare Finland to, for example, Germany, where I'm from, on a one-on-one basis. But in a way, what I really like about countries like Germany is that you have Berlin, you have Munich, you have Cologne, you have Hamburg, you have all these bigger cities that, you know, you could start a new life in. And as a 20-something-year-old, the fact that there was nowhere up to go from Helsinki meant that life started to feel a little bit small. Then the next reason as to why I felt like it was time to experience something else was that life started to feel a little bit too comfortable and therefore a little bit sterile. And I know this sounds like a really odd claim, but I give you a bit of a background. So if you talk to Finnish people as a foreigner, the first reaction is always, why did you move here? Like, why do you want to live here out of all the countries? And Finnish people are quite harsh on their own country, or they have the tendency to be quite harsh on their own country. Yet every Finnish person is going to tell you, but things in Finland work. And I never really understood what that meant, because I felt that things also work relatively well in Germany. But I once started to really see it once I lived in the UK for 2 semesters with some of my Finnish study mates. So in other words, Finland is a highly efficient country. It is very clean, it is very safe, but it also comes with a few restrictions and rules. And this is my personal experience, or my personal opinion. All in all, due to this high efficiency, very clean, very taken care of environment, life started to feel a little bit sterile and maybe a little bit too comfortable. And back in the days, I started to feel as though I'm craving for more versatility, more edges. I'm not saying that I wanted to feel unsafe every time that I was walking home by myself, or that I need to fear for my organs or anything like that, but I think my main mistake was that I started to compare Berlin to Helsinki quite a bit, and in comparison to Berlin, of course, Helsinki felt a little bit mousier. And I'm also not saying that I need to, you know, experience Berlin 24/7, but back in the days, back when I was in my 20s, I was thinking, oh, somehow I started to feel like I needed more versatility, that Helsinki, at least back in the days, wasn't really able to offer or cater to. Maybe up until now you listen to these reasons and you're wondering, okay, but what exactly was her problem? And I get that. I mean, I'm mostly talking from my personal experience, but the main reason as to why I really felt like I needed to move back to Central Europe and experience life in a different country again, apart from the whole studying thing, was, I hate myself for saying this because it's so cliche, but honestly, it was the weather. Don't get me wrong, I really love winter, I really love snow. I find the idea of living in an environment where it's minus 30 degrees super interesting. It was definitely something very special and very unique for me to experience. But after having done that for 7.5 years, you do get tired of it. So I honestly started to feel increasingly FOMO due to the fact that my friends in Central Europe were able to live life in t-shirts already in March. Meanwhile, in Finland, I knew that I'd be married to my winter coat up until the month of May. And I couldn't take it anymore. It was really this thing of, for the first 2 years, it's absolutely fantastic to be able to experience so much snow, even in Helsinki, and the darkness and everything cozy and great that comes with it. But at some point you're like, my life is too short to be living in the darkness all the time, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And Finnish summer is fantastic. If there's a good Finnish summer, those are the most memorable summers I've ever had because they were just simply so great, and there's something so unique to being able to live next to the Baltic Sea, to experience the white nights, to experience the lightness that comes after having gone through such a long period of winter and darkness. But it's just so short, and Central European summer really is also a bit longer than the Finnish one, and yeah, I just couldn't take it anymore, which is sad. And so would I move back to Helsinki or to Finland? Honestly, there are so many moments where I'm super melancholic about having had to leave Finland, and maybe, you know, there's a saying, and it really applies to this, that distance makes the heart grow fonder. And I'm thinking about Finland on a daily basis. I think about my life in Finland on a daily basis. There's always small things that remind me of my time there. My apartment is a Itälä and Marimekko showcase. I'm doing a lot of Finland PR. All my friends know the very basics about Finland at least. And it's really funny because I'm always joking to my friends that even though Finland is such a small country, you see something from Finland everywhere. And it can be the very stereotypical thing of stepping into an elevator that is made by the Finnish company called Kone, or you see somebody walking by with a Marimekko dress or bag. You don't really see people with Nokia phones anymore, but they do exist. The other day I heard the sound and I was thinking, wow, that's a blast from the past. So honestly, sometimes I'm thinking if we had the chance, I would love to pack up everything and just move back. And I also feel like I've taken my time in Helsinki a little bit too much for granted. So if I think about that, I used to live so close to the sea and I had the sea around me on a daily basis. I didn't see it back in the days, but I do feel quite melancholic about not being able to have that right now. So of course there's all these things, but the other day I had a patient from Tallinn visiting in our office, and it was really interesting because we started talking and I told her about my time in Helsinki, and I asked her if she would move back, and she also said there's so many great things about Estonia, but she just can't deal with the weather anymore. So we really connected on that, and it's sometimes really good to have that as a reminder because it helps me not to feel too sad about not living in Helsinki anymore. So yeah, that was a short insight into my experience. I could equally make an equally long, if not longer, video about the reasons as to why I moved to Finland and what I love so much about it. But maybe we'll do that some other time. Let me know in the comments if you think the same way, if you've been to Finland, what your experience with Finland was, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!